I mean, for me, there are many things that come into my mind in this regard. One is how to. I think for me, this has been like an introductory, like an opening the door, to meet all of you and to think in different, in parts that connect to each other. Okay, how can theories like social network be useful? How can it actually be done? And I think for me there are still many questions there. So how can we do research in these areas together if it's possible? Well, maybe not all, maybe just some, maybe no. Is it room for comparing different things that are being done? Is there a need? And I think Neil was mentioning to think about doing some courses on evaluation, something that goes. That is not just a short training, but something that is more consistent and that tackles different issues that are not being done. Because I think there is a need. I think that if you came, it's because you will see the need to do more thinking about these questions.
I think it's impossible. I think that as long as the humanitarians are happy with the discourse of saving lives and emergency things all the time, and they are reluctant to engage, to incorporate more sophisticated tools for programming, for evaluating, for understanding the context, it's impossible. And that discourse is instrumental for them. And as long as the academia is happy to look at their own, how do you say this? Belly button. Belly bottom, and reluctant to engage in dirty research. I mean, it's not only about this pure research, but dealing with real issues in real world outside there. It would be impossible for them to engage with the needs of the humanitarians. So I think it's impossible. I could say exactly the opposite thing. I'm saying this for the sake of discussing a bit. Sorry.
I don't believe you. That's why you push me to, we were pushing for this seminar. So
I'm going to say it in a different way. I think there is a paved way to go hand in hand, humanitarians and academia together, taking the best of the academia in terms of research and the capacities, and taking the best of humanitarians in terms of knowledge of the field and the work oriented to people in need. So it's perfectly possible. I mean, sorry, it's for the sake of discussing a bit, because I think both things could be said.
No, for me, it's one of the reasons I was very, very much happy to be invited. I mean, it's the discussion that we had with Kike, is that I've been fighting a lot within my organization to try to bring research pattern with our project. And the biggest problem was not an institutional problem, was an attitudinal problem. Everyone was telling, oh, it's a magnific idea, it's beautiful, I mean, let's do it. But that required that when you are in the field, you are a project manager, a program coordinator, you take the 10% more of your time, you take 10% less, so you have 100% of your time and you spend 90 and 10. No, you have 10 of your work and then you decide and willing to apply other 10% to do that. And it's an attitudinal issue. That's the most difficult part. I mean, again, before there was a discussion on what is the value for money for the discussion that we had on the methodology, but also what was the value for money in discussing internally in my organization to convince them that this was a good opportunity. That's another discussion. So, I mean, I think that you need a thinking on that. I always think that attitude alone can work. You need, unfortunately, in this world, you need attitude and value for money a bit. So we should think of both elements a bit, and what theory and practice together can bring in those two elements and use it as messages. I mean, that might be an interesting thing. Then I also have the answer that say that it's impossible, then I want to say that it's possible also. But now, one thing that a concrete thing is that when we are in the field, we have tons of information, a lot of information, and time to spend to do analysis and research that sometimes researchers look for.
Yes.
That's been my experience the last year and a half. It's like, oh, we are thinking to do that. Okay, but I have 150 community where I'm relating with. What type of information? The problem is that if we don't establish this link at the beginning, the way we might collect the information might be useless for research. So it might be good to think in that direction. That would be interesting to see.
For us, it was a bit getting out of our comfort zone because we do community intervention. We do social network analysis with community intervention, so it's the first time we have been in this position to think of social network analysis for humanitarian protection, and I think it made us think a lot, and coming here was a first step, I hope, to work more in this area. And I think you should be happy because you started a dialogue, and I'm sure that the dialogue will not end here. And if there is a dialogue and people are interested, because there is a need for it. So I think this merging of the research and the practice is very important, and you have started paving that path, which I think between all of us, we all said, oh, let's stay in contact, because I think we are all interested in what the others are doing, and I'm sure there will be further collaboration.
I guess I think off the top of my head, I think of broadly three areas. One being tools, as in academics can bring tools to practitioners that they don't otherwise have. Another is training. I do think there's an area there for evaluation in particular. And the last, I haven't thought through properly in my head, but it's something to do with independence. So if you start with the tools, Kike, you really threw me there. You said it's impossible to make this work. And I thought I need to come up with an example, a counter-example, to say, hey, it happened here, and I can't think of one. I'm sure there are some. Absolutely sure. I'm going to think about them on the plane. But I still believe that it's possible to overcome the kind of attitudinal points that you're talking about. I think those attitudinal points, there's a bifurcation. On the one hand, you have the intransigence. I want to keep doing my job as it currently is, and I don't want to be told how to do it by an academic problem. On the other hand, you have what I'm calling the unicorn problem. It's the way that we think of, RCTs are a good example of this. We thought, oh, we'll bring in some economists who'll do randomized controlled trials and they'll answer all of our problems, right? And to some degree, I think evaluation in general suffers from this problem. You can tool up, but you won't fix all the problems, no matter what you do. So I think that attitudinal thing, it kind of flicks between this, I don't want to change my way, and oh, you have to fix everything or I'm not going to listen kind of problem. So I don't know how to overcome those points. I think there's obviously something about partnerships, and Romina, when I asked you the question in the morning, it was actually partnerships was what I was vaguely trying to get at. It was the thought that you're an expert on SNA, I'm not, right? So how would we maybe get you and Nora together to learn about how your work could help influence protection risk analysis? You know? There's a question there about how we bring those domains of expertise together, and I think it involves funding structures and partnerships that can really make that stuff work. I'm probably going on too long, but on professionalization, I think there is an issue within the evaluation sector in particular about how in the humanitarian space we don't really treat it as a profession, and so there's no competency framework. If you're commissioning evaluations, you don't necessarily have to have any social science background. I'm being harsh, but that's kind of true. So until we change that competency framework, there won't be enough incentive for people to get the training that I think they should be getting in order to do the job well, right? So it's a many-part problem, but I think it's one that we have to look at. And I think some of the work of NOHA, if you look at some of your competitors, the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, for example, there is good work out there. Tufts do great stuff. So I think there's space to try and build on that stuff, and I think it's something that we should pursue. And the independent stuff, really, Antonio, I was thinking about your point. Certainly when it comes to evaluation, but I think when it comes to critical reflection in general, academia can bring a degree of independence that no other actor can bring. The question is, how can you make that relevant rather than having a researcher go into the field and go, oh, we'll talk about this, you know. So again, I think that's a partnerships problem. Those are my thoughts.
So the two things I'm going to say. I mean, the environment in which humanitarian work is undertaken is changing. I don't think that's well understood, although notwithstanding all the obvious reality around that. My view is that the majority of humanitarians have not linked into that change, with a few exceptions. You mentioned earlier, Niels, about the work of interaction on results-based protection that is focused on outcomes. I think that's important, but it's It's an outlier in many ways. So I think going forward, I mean, I can't keep saying it differently. The extent to which protection is not on the radar screen of most humanitarian outfits is a real problem. Protection beyond do no harm. Of course, do no harm is absolutely vital, but if we can't get beyond safeguarding people we call beneficiaries, by the way, people who are affected, safeguarding them from us, it's, in the year 2018, I think that says a lot. So the humanitarian system is not a good term, because the humanitarian apparatus, it's an industry, it's an infrastructure, but there are new actors coming on the scene. I think there is some hope. So going forward, why not examine? Why is it, since Biafra, not possible for humanitarians to be convinced about the value of investing in saving lives when they're at risk due to particular types of threats?
Neil mentioned the unicorn problem, but he didn't actually say what he meant. But I think there's an elephant in the room problem. And the elephant in the room is the business model of the aid enterprise. And this business model is built around an oligopoly of donors, aid agencies, NGOs, evaluators, and very strong corporate interest there. And so I think from a critical perspective, one avenue of research is how to break this model to at least ensure that you get some critical evaluations done that are not constrained by the corporate interests of the key players. I don't do evaluations for that reason. I do studies sometimes because then I have more freedom to say, but then people say, oh yeah, but this is your usual stuff, he's dreaming. But I think that there's a sense that the way in which evaluations are constrained by technicity reduces the wiggle room in terms of the critical analysis. And in academia, anthropologists, for example, looking at performative aspects, looking at the political economy of how things work in the system, maybe have a better capacity to understand certain social processes than the sort of evaluation corporate way of doing things. I'm not sure this is very helpful, but let's say it anyway.
When you were talking about humanitarian field as being a corporation, being a corporative thinking or way of acting, I should say that academia is too this way, unfortunately, and it's turning like that. So sometimes this collaboration is hindered by this corporative thinking and the way we have to be productive in the way the academic industry say we have to be productive. So sometimes it's not so much engaging in programs and in something that you have outside or doing evaluations or trying to improve these things. We have been discussing about this with Christina and Kike many times. Like, do they have the opportunity to have to save 1 month, 2 months to go to the field and do something really precise, go back, and then this can also contribute to your publications in the end, but the amount of time that the university allows you to be out is close to zero, at least within this university and many others in Spain at least. I think other frameworks or other countries are more open on this. And about the reflections during these days, I think that at least for me it was really wide eye-opening in many things. Like we talk a lot about the challenges of actually programming protection and how this can translate in the field. And sometimes you have the feeling that you have more questions than answers, as Francesco said, but I think still is a way of making the ball rolling and having discussions always take us somewhere. And like here it's a good place to make connections. So if you have Romina talking about networks and thinking, trying to think further, trying to go with this network thinking further and how to implement this in the protection field, is a good opportunity for someone else to engage and say, well, maybe I should go to Seville and see what is the relation if we can move things forward. So as far as I know, I have learned a lot from these 2 days, but still I have much more questions than answers, and I think that's the general feeling, at least for me.
Sometimes we think of partnerships, but before thinking of partnership, maybe what we should think is that we have just to sit down to generate critical thinking. What you were just saying, no? Just sit down for the sake of understanding each other without an objective. Then the objective you apply to your field. But discussing or try to setting an agenda before setting the partnership, I think we fall down again in the same scheme of creating a scheme before starting discussing. So sometimes I think that we might just have a step back and say, okay, just for the critical thinking. And every moment like this, not of presentation of things that everyone has developed, but before arriving to the final developing of things. For example, today in my presentation, I would have loved to come only with the doubts and the question and the critics, only that. These are my problems. These are the way I'm trying, not with the... So there might be, I don't know if there's a solution, but sometimes I've seen it in, at least in my very short experience in the last years, you can find people in different areas that are not just related to the institution, but are people that are interested to learn, and they put them in doubt. So you can put that critical thinking. I don't know, but it might be.
And there are many questions here on. I tend to think more and more about humanitarian workers as facilitators, mediators. Yeah, if really the knowledge has to be localized, and you have all these local, self-protective communities that know how to do things. It's how to support them rather than doing that for them. No, I don't know. There are many questions here that I think are very interesting to think about. And I think there are room for to keep doing this. There are many. We could. The idea of doing this seminar was starting a conversation, and that's why we thought about the first seminar on advancing research. We would like to do a second one, maybe within a year. Not necessarily here. We can think together when it's better. Maybe Brussels is more centered. We have facilities there. I don't know. Let's maybe Madrid. I don't know, but there. Yeah, Bilbao is beautiful, but I'm very glad that we gathered that we have people from the university that are interested from the NOAA program. But if we want to engage into a conversation with people from the field and people maybe from other NGOs, Bilbao it's a place where we have to recognize we're a bit in the periphery. But maybe we need to claim that. Why not? The periphery also has importance. I think this is also we all need to think. But in any case, I would like to thank you all for your interventions and for your questions and your interest. And we think and we have to keep working on it and thinking. So if you have any ideas, and maybe we can put a box where you can. I'm thinking in the next, in the follow-up of this seminar. So thank you very much.
Thank you.